Everyone, thank you for joining us today. We're going to call this to order. This is City Hardyville City Council Workshop, Council Chambers, 205 Main Street, Hardyville, South Carolina, 29927, Monday, March 24th, 2025 at 5 p.m. This is a workshop. We are more relaxed on a workshop. This is more a discussion than a formal meeting. There are no votes today. Everyone is entitled to speak at will. However, make sure that the previous speaker has completed their thoughts before you chime in. And I think it would be a good idea, and I particularly want to point this out to the public as well, be a good idea if somebody's speaking, before you jump in, ask the speaker if they're finished, so that nobody gets talked over, because sometimes you do it by accident, and I know I do. So if we make sure that everybody's completed their thoughts before they would chime in. For the public, if you want to say, I'm not going to have a formal public session. This is a small group. You want to say something while we're having discussion up here, just raise your hand, and when I recognize you, you can come forward, okay? So, nice and easy. Mr. Gruber, take it away.
Thank you, Mayor. This matter was recently before the City Council on a request to rezone property. Based upon the comments that were provided at Council, it was determined that a workshop session would be beneficial. So I've asked staff to prepare a presentation really that kind of accomplishes two things. One, it provides a refresher about the transect zones and what the overall vision is for the White Hardy Boulevard Main Street corridor that City Council adopted back in 2024, and then taking that information and then translating it to the current request, what the applicant is seeking, and then what staff's recommendations are going to be in order to hopefully accomplish two things. One, protecting the adjacent residential property in terms of its characteristics and developability, but still supporting the overall vision for the downtown corridor. And so with that, I'll turn it over to the planning staff and ask them to kind of cover their presentation.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council.
Good afternoon.
You'll bear with me. Transect zones are not the most simple thing to explain, but you guys are a lot smarter than most people, so maybe you can help me with this one as we go along.
Now that you buttered the bread, serve it.
So what is a transect zone? It's a visual zoning concept used to describe how environments vary from place to place based on the scale of human interaction. So if you're out in the country, you're not necessarily going to be meeting people, finding places together, because you have lots. So it goes from T1, which is a natural zone, all the way up to T6, urban core zone. In our ordinances, we are looking at T3, T4, and T5 in our downtown area, and I'll show you where those play out. This is specific to the downtown area. This is only in a specific area of our zoning ordinance. It was recently adopted last February, designed to encourage implementation of the White Hardy Boulevard Master Plan. We needed some teeth to help us get that done. And as I mentioned, it includes T3, T4, and T5. On the map here, you can see how it plays out. T4 is basically White Hardy Boulevard. So that one, in this case, is not really of interest to us. We are really looking at the T3 and the T5. And the next slide zones into the we're a little, the lot we're talking about is, if I wouldn't shake, it'd be that little jut out in the yellow there, in the red, the yellow. So the parcel where the JCNU office is currently is on the red, and this is the vacant lot behind there. Aside from the normal use table in the MZDO, we have the transect zones, and it adds an overlay, a zone of what can be allowed in those areas. And it's in our ordinance in the same chapter. The part that's really of importance to us is the parking. That's where parking was the reason we recommended that they go with the T5. But if we made some changes in the ordinance, if we looked at the ordinance, because parking's not allowed in T3, which is what that lot is currently zoned. So that's what we're going to focus this whole presentation on, is how this applies to transect zones apply to what they're requesting. We talked a lot about what the different heights were and other dimensional standards for the T3 and T5 zone. This basically shows you that information. You can see the T3 has frontage built out less. You want more green. The T5 town center, you want your buildings up there and less and more coverage. Same thing with the heights and the impervious service areas. All of those are vary throughout those three zones. Site access.
Go back before.
There is a lot on that slide. So T3, obviously it says residential at the top, and that's what it is to buffer that area between single-family residential that's not in a transect zone and the more intense uses that are in the transect zone. So that's why it does allow for some different things like the two-story homes and versus the three-story and those type of things.
So, go back. The current property where Saul's Court and JCNU are T3 now.
No, the where JCNU is T5 currently.
It's the lot behind.
The lot behind it that we're talking
Behind it is
is
T3.
T3.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay.
So where I'm going to go with this, once we get through everything, is to see how we can potentially leave it T3, leave it like it is, not rezone it, and allow for the uses to still occur as the applicant is requesting. So that's where I'm going with this. So it's going to take me a few minutes to get there. Are we good with that one now? You want to look at it some more?
Just have one question.
Mhm.
The ground floor ceiling height for T5 is a 12-foot minimum?
The ground floor ceiling height is a 12-foot minimum. Now, in the text of the document, it does say for certain uses in certain locations with the approval of SRC and other things and meeting other standards that they can go up to 25 feet. But that's very specific.
And my understanding with that, Brianna, is that allows for a concept of having maybe commercial development on the first floor and then maybe residential on a second or third floor above that. And so that's your storefront, is that 12-foot minimum.
So, explain to me, if Saul's Court is T3 now, right? The lot behind it,
Yes.
okay?
103 Saul's Court is T3.
Is T3. And that allows for 2 stories. It allows for 9-foot ceilings. It allows for, where's the parking?
The parking's not on here. That's
It's
what.
not parking. And maybe you're going to get to this.
Yeah.
Why, if it has all the things, from what I understand, want to be done, why are we changing it?
Yeah, go back. As you see here on this, that parking and when you look at 3.2A25, it gets into more detailed about shared parking. Right now in T3, it does not allow shared parking. And that is something that is essential for this project.
Explain the shared parking.
Shared parking, well, I've got a slide on that. So if we can move on to the shared parking and maybe I can cover that a little bit.
So let me,
Got control of the computer.
so you're saying that no residential T3s have allowance for parking?
No, they have parking, not shared parking with another parcel. let me go through this and
Okay.
maybe we can
All
try
right.
to get there, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. But the you have to kind of look at this as a whole of what you want the district to look like, I guess is the best way to talk about it. Um, for the transect zones, the key is to focus on safe pedestrian access. But you don't want the parking lots to be first and foremost. You want the parking lot to be interior to the lot. Parking should be located behind primary buildings. And if they're not behind the primary buildings, the ordinance doesn't say screened or buffered, it says masked. So you want to see something, living fence was something that was mentioned in there, among everything. Shared parking is permitted and should be encouraged. Shared parking is, you have a church that really only has events on a Sunday, they have extra parking. And you have a restaurant that doesn't have, that has events more when there's no church. They could possibly share the same parking lot because they're not needed all at the same time. Same thing with some of these residential lots with an office building. The office would need it during the daytime. Residences typically need it more at night. The type of residences that are going to be located here. Those are some of the things. And in these zones, like a downtown, historically, like we all have grew up in, shared parking is essential. It doesn't have to be on site. Parking has to be within a quarter of a mile. Some type of shared parking has to be available to these uses within a quarter of a mile to meet their parking standards. So that's what's important. There's the matrix over here on the right does get a little heady and full of numbers, and I'm not going to go into all of that. But it tells you, based on the types of uses that you have, what that factor that you should multiply the spaces by to see what kind of shared parking you would need. So if you have an office and a residence or retail and a residence nearby, what should that shared parking look like? So all of that is something that will take place once that application is in place and can only be approved by that staff review committee as a whole. The other important thing about this shared parking, it's really big on parking setbacks. And a lot of our ordinances and things you look at, there's not a setback for a parking lot. Here, there's a setback for a parking lot. Not only is it setback, but there's also setbacks within the parking lot for like wheel stops. They want to have that green area, and they want to have those as pedestrian ways. The pedestrian ways have to be so wide and have to be clear. When people park and the bumper's hanging back over the sidewalk, that can't happen in these shared parking lots because they're trying to be as efficient with the room as possible. Landscaping standards are required to prevent impacts to adjoining property. If there's a parking lot, you typically don't always see landscaping surrounding it or screening and buffering. It's a must in these zoning districts, in the transect zones. And cross-access easements must be approved and then recorded with the Register of Deeds to ensure future use and availability. That means that if someone sells it, that remains with the property, that shared cross-access easement. So I hope that kind of explains a little bit about why we're wanting the parking and the shared, and it even will help with our municipal buildings that'll be across the street and the Memorial Park and some other things to have these parking lot and parking facilities that can be shared. Also in the transect zone is a big section on buffers and lighting. Buffers, no matter which transect zone it is, no matter how it is, buffers are required, not recommended, not next to single-family residential properties. And it's pretty in-depth on what it requires. It also, they have to, when they're coming through staff review committee meeting, when they're doing all of this, they have to go through that staff review committee meeting. And the staff review has the ability to go to any that section of the ordinance with all of the landscaping buffers and make sure that those neighbors are protected. Lighting shall be of a pedestrian scale, meaning you're not real tall lights, just going to be down low level, approved by staff review committee, and will be, oh, I did have a typo there, will be reviewed to ensure no impact on adjoining properties. And that is a must. There can't be, light pollution, there can't be overshadows, any of that cannot happen. Over, a spillage is what we're calling it.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Talking about the staff approving it,
Mm-hmm.
does the public have access to the staff when they're making these reviews and recommendations, or is this kind of down?
The staff is going by the strict standards of what the ordinance says. So if, once it's approved in that ordinance, which we have some pretty stringent standards in here, that's what, if not, they go to the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Okay.
If we cannot agree, then we decide it needs to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals and they make that decision.
The staff review committee then is just basically reiterating what.
They're holding their feet to the fire of what's in the ordinance.
But to John's question, the answer is no.
The
Public is not, unless they know it's happening and they request to be there.
Yes, sir, Mayor. The staff review process is not a public process. The public
And that-
process is
that's what-
developing.
That's,
Over by that time?
That is correct.
that's what John was asking,
Yes, sir.
right?
So that's why we wanted to make sure you knew what all was in this ordinance, then, so you know what's coming out of it. Another section that we don't have in the rest of our ordinance is building massing. And I think we heard about big buildings on the corners and those kind of things. And I want to show you what's allowed and what's not allowed. The building massing, large buildings must be divided to appear as smaller volumes grouped together. Articulation is something that they're looking for, and I'm not an architect, but the building on the example over here on the right has a lot of articulation. You can see that it's broken up. It had different roof lines. It's got vertical and horizontal variation. What is prohibited is just a big block building, especially if it's on the corner. So I want to make sure that folks knew what that meant. In the T3, articulation spacing has to be every 50 feet. T5, every 50 feet as well. So that's a good thing to know, that we're going to have this articulation no matter which transect zone it's going to be in, and that you're not going to have these massive buildings right beside smaller buildings. How all this applies to the application for 103 Sauls Court. The zoning map amendment was requested to enable shared parking across 2 parcels and common utilities. That was the big move of why we were requesting it. Yes, the duplex is allowed in SFR T3 right now. But the key was getting the parking shared and being able to make it fit in with the rest of the transect zones. So we looked and said, is there a solution for the project other than rezoning to T5? That was staff's motivation here. So we looked at the shared parking component. We looked at the different zoning districts. We looked at the different transects. T3 currently does not allow for shared parking and parking as it needs to be placed in this project. Cross access easements are encouraged. That's good. That's great for the city. That's great for the future. The property owners know what, everybody knows what they're getting. And T3 zone intent is to protect existing residents from the more intense things at T5. So what that tells us is we need to change the ordinance. We need to do a text amendment rather than a rezoning. We need to do a text amendment, put those standards in there exactly like you want it for the shared parking for T3. For T3, leave it T3, leave it SFR. They can do what they want to do. We're just going to be able to allow the shared parking and the shared utilities and that cross access easements.
Is that a big deal to do?
Nope. And I'll tell you, one of the other things that this proposed solution helps to address was the concern that with Mr. Moyd's project, and again, he's outlined kind of the elements of it, but if for some reason he should win the lottery and decide that he wants to move to someplace that's warm year-round, and he sells that property to somebody else, they would still be constrained by with the development standards of T3. But if we amend it to allow for shared parking, not only does it help accomplish the goals of this project, I would argue that that's really in keeping with your overall design plans for the redeveloped White Hardy Boulevard and Main Street area. And Katie, I just emailed you a graphic, if you could pull it up real quick since you've got the laptop there. I think it's helpful to show.
Send it to me because that's on.
Nope, I saw it I thought I sent it to Katie.
She signed it.
Oh, well.
I know.
The question I have, can we go back to the buffers and screening requirements?
Okay, just
Can we enlarge that at all? My old eyes just can't quite.
I understand.
Thank you, John, I appreciate that.
the table. Mr. Mearsman, the table.
Yes, yes. Well, I'm just wondering about, you had mentioned that there has to be the green space in between them and all of that, and I understand all of that. My concern is will the properties have enough room for parking?
Well, the important part about the shared parking is you don't need as much parking.
No, but when we put in the screening, which means we're gonna have, what is the side setback on Saul's Court?
Well,
For anything, for parking or anything?
And as you can see here, these are different side setbacks than they normally would be. The place where there would be a setback for it, because you see 0, minimum 5 feet for detached. We're going to do that with those buildings and landscaping being on the outside of the lots.
Okay, but I'm talking the parking. Will the parking be,
We haven't, I can't really tell you all that until it's engineered completely, but what I'm saying, this ordinance in the language, and I'm gonna look at Katie for this, it's gonna tell her how she can approve that. It's gonna tell them how they can place it, and yes, it's not gonna make it unbuildable, but they may have less parking and have to rely on other parking in the area.
okay, that's the question that I was going with. I mean, the added things, and I mean, I understand the requirements for all of those, but, are we gonna restrict the parking for the use of the property?
See, that's kind of what I was going, too, that when you keep saying shared parking, I know you say share for across the street and stuff. Who else are they gonna share it with?
It's the way it works out, and once this gets going, because right now this is going to be one of the first we're looking at for the shared parking, but it's that quarter mile. Folks are supposed to be willing and able to walk that quarter mile. Now, handicap has to say the same.
Yep.
There's no difference in handicap. They have to have those are no gives on that. But
And here's another important element of that. So they have to submit a plan to us that meets those calculations, that crosshatch that Brandon was showing. And it's not just meeting the calculation, but this cross easement for parking has to be recorded and becomes part of the title work for those properties.
okay.
Again, because if they sell that parcel
Go.
and a new owner comes in and says, I want to redevelop it, you can't lose that shared parking because it doesn't function without it being there. So not only do they have to identify it from a calculation standpoint, it has to be recorded as part of it. So if you look at the T5 parcel and the T3, if they're going to use those two to meet those calculations, there going to has to be a cross easement recorded between them. That's it, so that the shared parking is locked in.
All right, Brian, I know we have some residents here probably gonna want to ask or something, but was that one of the main concerns? I know that was one of them, with the parking and the building and the lot behind. Does that address one of the main concerns of the residents?
I'd like to hear from them because
I
I
do
mean,
too.
I
I
think we
would
got
too.
some other answers that I brought the ordinance and I can try to look it up or we can get back to them with other things. But I do believe that by the in-depth review that's required of these projects when they come in, that we can address most of that information. Those buffers, lighting, and parking and noise were a lot of them.
Okay.
Yeah, parking, I know was one.
The question is, do we have any governing guidelines say the number of parking spaces required
Absolutely.
residential, and we also have that for commercial.
Yes.
Okay,
We have that in for the entire ordinance, and then you go back to that.
That chart that's over here.
Okay.
That's
You
how
say
the
that one
sharing
is
factor-
residential, the other is office. Where these two meet will tell you how many parking spaces you need for that shared use.
okay, okay. I think that can only be an estimate. You're hoping that everybody in the residential is gone when the commercial.
That's how parking is for the most part, and a lot of it is based on signage and other things, and we make sure that all that's taken care of.
Okay, my concern is that I don't wanna restrict usage because of the parking.
I have a question regarding the parking, which I think was one of the issues. Is there anywhere in this ordinance that the requirement for shared parking be a specific location? Because it's one thing if you put the parking adjoining the existing parking. It's another thing if you put it on the other side of the building, closest to the house.
It
Is there-
cannot be closest to the house. It
So
has to be interior to the lot.
it has to be
the project.
interior, so, and does it have to be adjacent to the lot it's sharing?
No, not necessarily, but in this case, because of the placement of where they're required to place the new building that they're gonna build on that front lot, and where they're going to put the duplex, it will be adjacent to each other.
Okay, so that, and that's
it'll
where I'm
straddle
getting.
that
I'm
part-
I'm
that
not
property
worried
line.
about other places right now, because this is only a quarter of an acre. All right,
That's
so
the importance of
I
sharing that
just
lot.
want to make sure that the parking is not intrusive to the adjoining houses.
Cannot be, and that's what I talked about, the masking. If it's there, there's got to be
Buffer.
masonry wall, or there's got to be
Buffer.
living fence or something substantial for the purposes of, and it's very specific in there, lighting, impact, noise, odors, any of that.
Okay, so my next question is about buffering. Okay, there are some trees there between this quarter of an acre and the next house, right? Now, we're requiring a buffer if something goes there, but it just says buffer. Are there any specifics about what has to be there? Does it have to completely cover? You know, you can put a pine tree that takes up this much room and say that's a buffer.
This is
Do
where-
we have something specific?
We do, this talks about beefing up what we already have, in this section of the ordinance. But what we do is we require understory and overstory. So you got two different things going on there. You've got the understory for the low-level things, and then the canopies and everything else that are gonna, so there's got to be a whole planting plan. It has to be approved. I can't tell you recently how many planting plans I've heard Katie have to disapprove and tell them to go back, start over, because they want to minimize it. We do not allow that.
Okay, because here's the significance of the question. Again, it's only a quarter of an acre. Oh, if we require buffering that makes that quarter of an acre 2/10 instead of 2.4, so be it?
It will be appropriate for the uses, and it'll be appropriate to separate it. Now, it won't be as wide as some of the ones in other areas of.
No, I understand,
But it will-
but if there's a
composition-
requirement, it's going to come from that quarter of an acre. I guess, let me put it that way.
Absolutely.
Has to come from that
Absolutely. It
area,
has to
and it
be.
has to be under and over.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, one of the things that I heard the last time is, I don't want, a tall structure looking into somebody's bedroom, okay?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And that's, so, I think we need, I asked a specific question the last time, and I'd like to hear from the residents what they think about what they just heard. And what additional objections would you like to put forward based on what you just heard?
Mr. Mayor, and one more quick question.
Sure.
What are the physical dimensions of these lots? I know quarter acre, but I don't have the width and the depth of these two lots. What are
Not
they?
much.
It's- doesn't look, visually, it doesn't look too much.
No, I mean, what is the width and the depth of the two lots combined?
I would have to,
I understand it's a half acre, but is it the width, the depth, this is what I'm trying to establish.
Until we get into the engineering of it all, I don't have that information. We can certainly get that for you before we,
It
I think it's
exists.
very
It's-
important as we discuss this because,
We're gonna put it up on there.
okay,
We've got maps that we can show
Okay.
what that looks like.
a half acre could be 30 feet wide and 300 feet long.
Rather than talk about it theoretically, let's just look at it and.
And the reason we haven't looked into that is the zoning wasn't in, or the
We didn't know
standards
which
weren't in
zoning.
place to do.
Okay, I understand. It's hard to visualize for me. I can drive by it, but I just don't.
It's so nice and slow right now.
it might be for me. Yeah, why don't you just put my name?
Well, you're wound for sound tonight.
Yeah. There's,
Did you have
Yeah.
a cream of wheat this morning? Or?
there's no one safe tonight. Yeah. Let's put the map up.
Oh, he's got a whole bunch of them down there. Don't throw that. No, he's got plenty. Don't throw one of my candies at him.
There you go. Sorry, we didn't have a mouse for this today.
Aren't satellites amazing?
There we go.
All right, there we are.
Oh, let me find. This is gonna be approximate, keep in mind.
Okay.
So the front one, about 96,
That's width or that's depth?
Yeah, that's-
Depth. Okay.
and then
That's the front one, yeah.
this is the back one,
About 90.
about 90.
95.
That's 180-ish
Yeah.
at the,
Oh, sorry.
that middle line, yeah,
Yeah.
probably be the best one to do.
106.
No, he wanted the dimensions.
Dimensions.
Oh, 110 by 110.
With the acreage, I can get real easy. It's just,
A half acre, wasn't it?
yeah.
124.
1.25.
So looking at is,
Now 1.25.
all right, so that's the property line, the yellow. Inside that yellow, are these trees I see?
It's kind of hard to, there's an easement.
I know trees are there, I just don't know where the property line is.
Well, and this is aerial, so it's not exact
And there's
here.
an easement between his property
Yeah,
and
this is-
this property.
This is an easement.
There aren't any trees on the property. It's only the buffer that's aligned his property.
All those trees are in,
That easement.
That's on
Or
JCHU,
outside.
but that's the current buffer until we get permission from the city to get the setback with that before we do anything. But those,
Trees are in that buffer.
yeah, it's in
Or
that buffer right
that
there.
unopened,
Right.
in that easement.
I guess where I'm going with this is if
We're not
there's
disturbing
trees
those trees.
inside
Right.
that yellow line, does that allow them to cut it down?
We won't be disturbing those.
Yeah, one
Okay,
second.
yeah, let's,
Um,
I'll tell you, before we go further, I offered the public,
Okay.
let's give the public a chance, because we can talk all day, but until we hear from the residents, we don't really understand where the potential problems are.
Yeah, that's
If you would, please state your name and address for the public record.
How are y'all?
Aye.
I'm Jonathan Bullard, 105 Sauls Court. A lot of things we're not talking about is the covenants that lot number 2 in Saul's subdivision falls under. The guidelines are a lot stricter than the zoning ordinance. Every person who purchases a piece of property in the Saul subdivision does sign this when they purchase the property. I do have a copy of the covenants I can provide to anybody who would like to see it. The setbacks are a lot more than the T3, T5 setbacks. I do have some of those I can go over with y'all if you'd like to hear.
Now, well, just to clarify, when you say covenants, is this part of an HOA situation, Falls Court?
We have the applicant submitted a letter from Tom Johnson's office that this lot, being that it was part of the Friends of the Library, was not included in that, is what I had. Maybe Mr. Gruber can clarify that.
Ultimately, where we wind up going is the enforcement of covenants and restrictions are a private right. Now, obviously, we don't want to grant anything that would be in contravention to that, but we're also not going to interject ourselves between a property dispute between multiple property owners. And so, for our purposes, I think we're looking at if from a development permitting standpoint, what is it that we feel comfortable with, if anything? But to the extent that that would conflict with a covenant and restriction, the covenant and restriction is going to control, but it's going to be a private matter for them as the HOA, whatever the governing body is, to enforce those covenants and restrictions.
But what I'm confused about, is this lot governed by these covenants?
Yes, I have from
You've got
Tom
one
Johnson.
person saying yes, and you've got one person saying no.
What do you have, Brian, from Tom Johnson?
I mean, I have the copy of all my paperwork. I purchased the home. The only lot that is not included in the covenants is lot number 1, which is the library. 2 through 12 is included.
And not saying that you're wrong, not saying that you're right, just saying that you've got an opinion on it and we've received something from somebody else that says something contradictory. We're not in a position where we can pick who's right and who's wrong.
I agree.
Right, so that's one thing we have to get settled.
Yes, sir.
What are the governing covenants to this property?
And I can
Are they
provide y'all-
governed by this, or are they not? That's a basic question that we need to get answered.
governed by the homeowners of Saul's subdivision, but they trump.
We need,
If they're more strict, whichever is more strict is the one that has to be followed.
Brian, what we have to find out
Yes, sir.
is through our legal counsel is what, not somebody else's excuse me. We have to find out from our legal counsel and be advised as to what our legal interpretation is. Because this obviously is a key point.
Yes, sir.
Mayor Williams.
Well, that's, yes, John.
I was just to dovetail on what you said, how are we gonna do it? If he's got a legal opinion, who would settle this?
The city attorney.
If he's got an opinion, attorney and whatever, Josh, who
Well, I
does
think
this?
I think at some point, then we as a city and you as a resident would have to decide what next legal step we need to take to settle the dispute. And I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not even going to go there.
Sir,
Madam Attorney.
I can answer that for you. If there are private covenants on that land, it doesn't matter what they say. The city doesn't enforce private covenants. That is a private matter between the property owners. What the city does enforce are your own zoning code and your zoning regulations. So if there are private covenants on these parcels, that is something that the property owners have to figure out between themselves.
So
But if you
let's say it's Margaritaville, okay? They have CC&Rs, right? So you're saying that
Yeah.
their CC&Rs
Good example of this. Okay, I know
Yeah,
exactly
I
where you're
mean,
going. Yep.
you
So
know
our,
that-
our zoning code allows for the installation of fences, residential fences, but the covenants and restrictions of Margaritaville doesn't. So from an enforcement standpoint, you can't build a fence because the covenants prohibit it, but our zoning standards don't look at the covenants and restrictions of private communities because it's a very legal answer as to whether, one, it exists, and two, is it enforceable? And so the only entity that can make that determination is a court. So where I'm going is we can't make our planning decisions based upon what legal interpretations may or may not come out. All I can say is anything that you decide will not override the applicability of covenants and restrictions. They would still be in place, but it's up to the private property owners who are part of those covenants and restrictions to enforce them.
So if I use your example, if this was Margaritaville, all right, and the CCNR says no fence, and he wanted to put a fence in, the CCNRs would overrule, as they do now.
Yes.
So isn't the same thing applicable to what he's saying? He's saying that the CCNRs take precedent over that zone.
But what
We're not the deciding body for that. It would be a court of law that would decide that. He would
be a
have to
court
take,
of law.
it's a private matter that he would have to file. If there is something that this property does that's in violation of the CCRs, he would have to file a private lawsuit and get a decision from a court, not from this body.
Okay, so if Steve in Margaritaville wanted to build a fence which is against the CCNRs, he would have to take it to court.
Correct. Or vice versa, or Minto would essentially sue them to prevent the installation of it.
All right, I understand.
In the middle of this.
That's what you get from trying to put a fence in Margaritaville.
Well, my concern with all this is, are we spinning our wheels until this matter is settled?
Well,
I would argue no, and here's why I would argue no. It goes back to the broader concept of this is not just for this particular property. This is how we should handle any similar request when we're transitioning from T5 to T3. And that's where I would go back to, if you can pull that graphic up. The concept for this area, these examples right here are great examples of shared parking. And so by virtue, and again, this is an illustrative concept plan, so this is not the code or set in stone of what's going to happen, but it's supposed to be expressing the idea that you put your businesses up along the street, you have parking to the interior, and it shares parking with potential other opportunities that could be residential in nature, because that's the vision that you have for your downtown. And so what I think the council should be looking at from a planning perspective, does this concept make sense and should it be replicated? Not that it necessarily applies to just this property, but it should be for the entire corridor.
all right, so I'm sorry to interrupt, but we needed to have some clarification. So please continue.
Don't really have much more. I mean, we don't want multifamily commercial properties on a dead-end road. I've lived there for 30 years. These rules, these covenant rules were set in place for a reason. Yes, they might not pertain to y'all voting on it, but it means a lot to us that live there.
No, I understand, but
An immense amount.
But here's the point that we're trying to with the zoning that's there now, they could go and put a duplex on that property, right?
But if y'all allow them to do that, who's held responsible if it were to go to the law route?
Well, if again, back to the basic question, because I'm trying to understand this. If we do nothing, right? If we do nothing, the landowner, whoever it might be, can go and put a duplex, two-story duplex, because that's T3, and T3 allows for two-story duplex apartments, or duplex housing, not apartments. So here's the thing. What we're faced with is if we don't do anything, they can still build. Your objective is not to build anything.
I want a single-family residential home built right there.
But that, sir, unless I understand, the zoning,
Only
the
lot.
zoning can do otherwise without us touching it.
Which is my next question of, you know, who decided with the rezoning that that was going to be T3 over
It's
when it was
T3
originally-
now.
Yes, now, but it was not T3.
Was it changed?
With the additional transit. In February of 2024.
And to my knowledge, nobody on
February
Saul's Court-
2024.
It was the whole downtown and implementing the White Party master plan is what did that.
But why that interior lot on Saul's Court?
Gentlemen, he has until he yields the floor, I will not call on you, but I understand you want to.
I understand.
So, I mean, you can keep your hand up. I'm just saying, he has the floor until he yields it.
That lot does not touch Main Street.
Which is why it's T3 and not T5.
Yes, sir. But so
You can
is
go
my
back-
lot.
Yeah.
May I ask, I would love to see the restrictive covenants that you're speaking of.
I would love to provide it to you.
Well, you said it has different setbacks and those things. I can't place anything in my mind without seeing those in, where we.
Well, I think they have
If you
to,
could provide those to,
So right now, no building shall be erected on any residential building lot nearer than 25 feet to the front lot, nor nearer than 10 feet to any side lot. All lots in said residential area shall be used for residential purposes exclusively. No structure except as hereinafter provided shall be erected, altered, placed, or permitted to remain on any lot other than one detached single-family dwelling not to exceed 2 1/2 stories in height, and one small story accessory building, which may include a detached private 1 or 2 car garage. And this goes for lots 2 through 12 in the Saul subdivision.
Madam Attorney, do you have a copy of what he's reading?
I don't. I would have to do a title search on the property to see what type of conditions. But again, conditions and covenants, the city is not a party to those, and the city does not enforce them, and the city's not bound by them because we're not a party to it.
But me personally, and I don't speak for the city, I don't want to be in a lawsuit with this gentleman or anybody else on Saul's Court, or with him or anybody. And so we're trying to come up with a decision here, which won't be today. We're trying to hear all the facts so that whatever we end up deciding when we do come to a vote, we can be as intelligent and fair as possible.
Thank y'all.
To everybody, okay? So that's why we're asking questions. We're not making decisions here. That's why it's a workshop. This is not a decision-making meeting. It's a fact-finding meeting. That's why we're asking questions, why we're asking you questions, why you're telling us stuff, so we can find the facts to make a fair and just decision.
Y'all.
Okay? So, and if you, when you hear the rest, if you have further, just raise your hand. Now, gentlemen, it's your turn.
Mr. Mayor, member of the council, I'm going to provide some good clarification over what the gentleman just said. As a practitioner who has to deal with these issues every day, when you agree to any zoning as a designer and anything else, if there are covenants on that property, I have to conform to those covenants. We stopped this project one time before when we were told that there was this restrictive covenant, and supposedly my client received information from his attorney that that was clarified. If it has not been, we still can't proceed with our project without addressing whether those covenants are enforceable for that lot or they're not. There's no design, what you approve here will not allow us to do anything that's beyond what those covenants allow for them. Every one of those lots on that street right now is T3. Clearly, none of them can do anything relative to T3 because those covenants restricted. So the gentleman's right. If those covenants are enforceable, then we are hell-bound to those covenants. So that is something that we do not argue at all. If the covenants are enforceable, we have to rework our project. It's not going to be able to be done with the townhouses if that's the case. So you are not going to be exposed by this my client or me as a designer to go outside of covenants. I have a duty as a professional to do what's right by law. And if those covenants are enforced, they're the law for that project. We don't step outside of those things.
Okay, so now, if you could go back, for the record, please state your name and your affiliation.
Thank you. My name is Shedrick Coleman. I'm architect with Shed Architecture.
Okay. So, I don't know to anybody else, but doesn't it seem a core issue is to find out what the covenants here?
Further, yes, sir.
Mayor, I apologize, but I've got to caution you all about going down this path. Because if you say that you need some kind of court judgment in order to make your planning decisions, you are effectively letting any other property owner know that if they want to challenge a rezoning, all they have to do is say, this isn't allowed, and you could hold it up for years. So I go back to what the council should be focusing on. What are your planning principles? What is the code that you adopt? And that should be in line with your expectations. I would caution you to not interject private covenants and restrictions because we have no ability to control them or regulate them.
And again, if you allow me, we can't.
That's good counsel. Okay, understood.
We cannot disobey the covenants. I've recently renovated my house based on being able to do it by the code. Yes, I could do whatever I want, but I had to submit the plans for my residents to my HOA for them to approve what I was planning to do, regardless of me getting a permit. If my HOA said no, I couldn't do it. That's what the restrictions of the covenants are.
Right.
That's what this gentleman's talking about.
That's what he's saying.
We are writing with that. It doesn't affect the zoning. It doesn't affect any code issue. It is related to that subdivision and HOA, which we have to follow. It does not impose anything upon this board. I'm telling you, it just does not. We are able to move project along, and there are numerous rules and regulations that go well outside of zoning that we have to comply with, be they civil, architectural, whatever. There are a lot of laws, and we have to navigate through all of them to make sure that our project meets everything, not just the zoning issue. So I am definitely sensitive to you. As I told you, I've been 13 years on the planning board. I get it. And you don't want to make a mistake in something like this, and especially with this being one of the first projects in this new, under this new zoning, it's important you get it right. And we are probably one of the best groups of people because of this understanding to help navigate through it. I mean, we've been working with your planning board tremendously through this. I mean, they've been great, and we've been listening and trying to navigate through all this. We don't want to see something go wrong. We believe we have a great project. I have some examples of that for you, actually, to show you what we're intending, because it's important for you to understand we're not just throwing something out here. We are trying to make sure that what we do this first time would comply, first off, with the zoning. Now we'll have to go back and get clarification on the issues of the covenants. But that first thing is to let you see what our intent is relative to this zoning decision. We want to make sure you're comfortable with what we intend to do if the rest of this gets worked out.
I think 4 of us live under HOAs, and we can't plant a bush without having the HOA approve it. Ted, I know you're back there and making gestures.
What this gentleman is talking about with the restrictive covenant, I contacted the Register of Deed and was trying to get the property into my name, into the business name, and they told me, no, Mr. Moyd, what you need to do is contact an attorney. I said, well, you can't give me any advice? They said, we don't give anyone advice. You need to contact an attorney. So the attorney who I bought, who did the closing for me, Tom Johnson, and I even paid insurance for our title research to make sure that everything was legit before I even went this avenue, because I know planning. You know, I was a planning and zoning director also for Jasper County. I was the first. So you know I know planning and zoning a little bit, not as much as these guys, but at least I have some concept of it. And so they told me, go and get an attorney, get him to send you a certified letter. I sent it to the city like they requested. He sent it to them. He said it was no restricted covenants because what happened, that property was sold to the Friends of the Library, and the Friends of the Library, when they sold it to the persons who I bought it from, all the restrictive covenants went away. And when I bought it from that couple that I bought it from, there weren't any restrictive covenants on it. Now, what he's talking about, that's ancient history before he was born, even probably before his dad was born. You know what I'm saying? He's talking what he's been told. He might have his proof of what he's been told, but I know what I paid for an attorney to do for me. And so if the attorney didn't do what he was supposed to do, guess who's that gonna be on? And that's all I got to say, because I went through the process. They told me, said they couldn't do anything until I made sure these ladies and the gentleman told me I could not even contact them until they received that letter. And they received an official letter from the attorney. So that's not my fault. I paid for what I paid for. So it's not on me. Everything you guys asked me to do, I have done. This has been going on for almost 3 years trying to get this project done. And I feel some type of way because I don't think no one else went through as much as I've went through just to try to help this city. And I've been helping this city for 25 years with affordable housing projects. Everything I can do. This is home. I love this place. I'm not going anywhere. No one's going to run me from here. This is where I want to be until I die, and this will be until I work and die. I mean, it's not fair to me. You guys know me. You guys don't. I'm not a stranger. I've been here for 30-something years. You guys know me. I'm not going anywhere. I went to the bank. I got financing for this project already. How do you think I feel? I got financing, and now I'm going through this again. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I,
Yes.
for one, I would like to see what plans they have involved before
Okay, so
we're not
let's
making a decision tonight. I'd like to see what they have.
let's go to that. Do you have what you want to do?
I have.
Thank you.
These drawings are only for the mixed-use building at the front because that's really what we've been working on, but it has concepts of the,
Shutter, is this the correct one? Is that the correct one?
yeah, that's
Okay.
what this is.
Okay, thank you.
This is what you are planning for the property facing Main Street?
Yes, that is
That is Main
the
Street.
mixed-use office and residential building elevation. Those are the front is the one with the storefront along, and the top one is what faces the parking lot area. And then those are the two sides on the next sheet. And behind those are, on the next sheets are three-dimensional drawings of what those buildings look like in mass, including the neighboring residences around with the foliage that exists right now. So just to try and give some idea to you of what the scale of these buildings are, that there's vegetation that would exist between and give you views of what that would look like from the street level from various areas, just to let you see that we're not overwhelming anything. The building is 2 stories on the front, which could be 3. We're not looking at a 3-story building. It's a 2-story building along Main Street, and then 2-story townhouses complying with the T3 criteria with porches and stoops on the back. The building at the street, the sidewall facing the neighbor is blank, doesn't have any windows overlooking that neighbor. And that's the ones closest to the street there. So we understand where the project is, we understand what we're trying to do, and it is basically in compliance with what the T3 and the T5 would like you to see with the parking in between those 2 buildings, between those 3 buildings.
Sir, let me ask you a question. Based on this layout, and we saw before, we're talking about a lot that has 110 feet of depth, okay? Plus you have a setback. What's the setback required in the front?
10 feet.
10 feet? Well, I'm just saying, it seems like a lot to have two buildings in 110 feet with a requirement of some between it, doesn't it?
I'm thinking the same thing.
Right?
The
A lot of building on a little piece of land.
site plan that was up there earlier, that is the correct site plan. Just pull that back up. Yes, and there's, there's the site plan of what those buildings and how they would be sited and parking in between. So that shows how all that does fit on the property as we propose.
These garages those are just,
That's an open parking lot, it's not garage.
no, I was looking at this third sheet.
Those are the existing homes.
Oh, those are the existing homes. Oh, okay, okay.
That's showing
Just to get-
scale
just to
of
show
the
scale.
surrounding
Okay.
houses, the two across the street.
Okay, the street is here. Okay,
I
now
see.
I understand.
Now I get it.
Yes, okay, thank you. Thank you.
This is Saul's
Now,
Court.
and what, that concept is based on a total, depth of 187 feet for the two lots?
Yes, I mean, that, what you see there, which conforms to all the setbacks and everything, is exactly what is represented on these drawings.
Okay, those conform to the setbacks current on the T3 zoning.
On the T3 zoning, yes, and
Okay.
the T5 at the front.
Okay, but we're unfamiliar with what the HOA would be or all that. That's
Again,
something.
if the HOA turns out to be something, we're in a
You can adjust.
totally different ballgame.
You can adjust to that, okay.
Did you have that in mind, like if you had to adjust? I mean, if something was
If, and I think Mr. Moyd has already talked about it, but if we end up having to deal with the issue of the covenants being enforced, those townhouses go away. They're not single-family buildings. There's no way around that language. I mean, we can't create something that's, totally doesn't work with that. So if it does turn out that that's the case, the zoning still would remain, it still would remain to be T3. That's something you already zoned. But what would be possible to be built on that lot would not be those townhouses that are allowed by T3.
Okay. Oh, wow.
Brian, could you come back up? I want to ask you a question. And there's no right or wrong answer.
Yes, sir.
I just want to know what's in your head,
Yes, sir.
okay? If I understood you right, what you want only on that quarter of an acre is one-story, single-family home. That's your,
It doesn't have to be one story.
it doesn't have to be one.
No, sir. It's a single-family home. It can't be over two
Okay.
and one half.
So, so you just want one family on that quarter of an
I
acre?
don't know if y'all have ever walked or ran a quarter of an acre or 0.47 of an acre. But that, I mean, I can hit you with a baseball.
No, I've looked at homes in my past, shop
we're
that
talking-
were on a quarter of an acre. I know
Talking
it's small. But that's not my question.
Yes, sir.
If you had your first choice, and again, I'm not passing judgment on it, what would you want to see on that quarter of an acre?
If, fill the only empty lot in Saul's Court with a single-family home like the rest of them.
One or two stories?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And nothing else is acceptable to you?
I mean, that's what I would like to see. I'm not saying nothing else is acceptable, but that's what I would prefer to see, and that's
Okay.
what most
No.
of the people that live on Saul's Court would.
I'm not,
prefer to see.
there's no right or wrong answer. I'm just trying to make sure I understand.
I'm not against growth. I'm not against development. I think it all has its right place and areas for it to happen. But when I bought this house, I've lived there 30 years. I didn't buy in an area that's rural that could be built, where I could be built on top of. I bought in a subdivision that was built out. wasn't expecting anything else to be built in there other than, in the future of that one empty lot, a single family home. That's where I put my cards at when I went to purchase a home. I get if you buy, down here on Plantation Drive and you've lived here forever, development's going to come eventually, and it could come right up against you. But that's why I picked where I live.
But the current zoning allows, as T3, it allows for this, but not shared parking. Is that correct? I think for the record, let's put that verbally, please.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Did I see a hand raised?
Yes. Being a businessman, I didn't go out and purchase this property just to build a single-family residence. That was not my intention. And just because you have one ill-fated resident here who is giving me all...
Please, Ted, we are not going to pass
All right, okay, I'm
judgment on
sorry. All right,
anybody
all right,
here.
I'm
I'm
sorry.
not passing
All right,
judgment on
okay,
you.
all right.
I'm not passing judgment on you,
Fine,
please.
fine. I have one...
Don't talk
person.
over me.
Okay, I have one person. It's not like you have a house full of residents from that community who's giving you grief. This is one person. He's not the only one that lives next door. It's another lady who owns double, triple property next door. She's not here. She's not complaining. I mean, it's his right. Don't get me wrong. But when I purchased that property, I didn't purchase the property to build a single-family residence. And I don't think no one should tell me what I should build on there if I met the requirements, okay? So you don't tell me and you don't ask someone who lives next door what you want built there. I mean, you didn't ask me what I want built there. So I think that's a little,
Okay.
me, let me finish. So I think that was wrong for you to put him in that spot.
He's being disrespectful.
Just let me finish. I think it was wrong for you to put it because you didn't put me in that spot. And I bought this property as commercial because I wanted to develop it. I wanted to help the downtown growth. I heard what y'all were doing as the city. And so I wanted to comply. I had property on Main Street. I said, well, this would be the perfect opportunity for me and my company to expand and grow. We have met all the requirements, sir. We have met everything. We don't have any problem. I told you, we went to the attorney. The attorney sent the letter. So you got proof there on file that the attorney said there was not a restrictive covenant. So I don't understand why I'm up here going on into my third year trying to get a project done. And I want to get it done, but seem like you guys don't want me to do it.
No, that's not.
Mr. Mayor,
Uh,
just for the record, there's another neighbor here.
Ma'am, do you want to come up?
That's the
State your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Maureen Gardner, and I live at 106 Sauls Court. My neighbor at 108 Sauls Court is working, and she couldn't be here. So there are more neighbors that are concerned about this development. The biggest thing is, obviously the parking and the shared parking. We want a single family home. We just, like Bullard said, or Jonathan Bullard said, we want, development and growth just in a different area.
Yeah, I did, at the planning commission, I did see that other woman here.
And then there was 3 other people here. They just,
Understood,
sign was small.
understood.
They didn't know the date.
But, Ted, you say a lot of things, but I just want to say, you talk about only one person objecting, and you're only one person. So what we're here on a workshop is trying to do the right thing for one person in that neighborhood and you. To accuse us of not putting up barriers to doing your project, I don't think is advancing your cause. So we're here, as I said several times, to listen to learn, and we're not voting, so we can go back and talk about this and think about it and do the right thing. We're not passing judgment on you, Ted, and we're not passing judgment on the residents of Sauls Court. We're listening to everyone, okay?
I appreciate
Sir,
it.
do you want to, I'm sorry, are you finished, ma'am?
Yes, sir, I am. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I ask a question? Current T5 zoning on the building on Main Street allows for another floor, correct? Okay. And your proposed duplexes, I see, what am I counting? 6? 4? What am I counting?
There are four.
4.
Those are duplex buildings, so it's 4 units.
Okay. If you went up one more floor on your main building, you would be able to get 2, 3 apartments in there? 2? What, I'm just, I'm throwing something out there for that.
If I might add to that, with the parking constraints in the area right now, currently as today, and when we looked at this, that's what we were looking at, are there opportunities for shared parking? And there weren't. That's where we went at this time. There will be in the future when other things are built and developed, but right now we have to know that there's going to be parking that they could share, and that was one of the things that we were looking at. We discussed on-street parking, we talked about the DOT and our standards on Main Street. We looked at all the options, and that's where we got to. Also, some of the shared utilities that are going to be needed. Right now, there's some utilities that are almost underneath where the old library sits, and those would be having to rework those as well.
Where I was going with that is if you went up one more floor, and then you did build a single family on that back lot, is that a workable?
Well, you would have to have more parking to deal with, and you still would have the same issue of the parking sitting on the T5 property. You'd end up right at the same point, only you'd have a single-family lot. We would not be able to get the parking all on that front lot. We wouldn't be able to do that. So, and you wouldn't be able to put that parking
okay.
on that single-family
This
lot.
is where I'm going. I'm trying to find a solution here, folks. I see both sides of this.
The text amendment would help with that.
The what?
The text amendment that we're recommending would help with that, but there would have to be some reconfiguration there.
Well, because this is where I'm going with this. I know you, Ted, are looking at the viability of the revenue coming from these rentals. And I know you folks also don't want this. Is there some way to increase the volume of your front building, have a one-story home on the back? It would take some changing on ours to share that parking in between. Could we accomplish it? Can it be accomplished?
That's an answer that would be an economic answer on whether we can make this work. So I can't answer that on behalf of my client.
That's an answer. Maybe it's worth researching at least.
That I would say it would be very difficult architecturally to create what you're talking about and have the scale of it work. And you'd still have a big building sitting, you'd have a 3-story building now sitting next to a single-story building. It's basically the same thing to me. We have a building that's a little bit more harmonious with the surrounding neighborhoods because we have a single-family house to the right of us. We have a single-family house on the left, and now we built this big 3-story building right in the midst of them. I really think that's not where we want to go.
Okay.
I mean, we really want to do something that enhances what you're trying to create here.
I understand that, but if Ted sold everything and moved on down the road to another place, somebody else could come in there and build a 3-story building, correct?
But
All right, that's,
we're faced with where we are now. And I want to bring something up that I think that we have a issue here that goes beyond our property. Right now, this neighborhood is zone T3. Every one of these lots right now is T3. Is it appropriate for that, first off, to be T3 anymore? And secondly, if, say, we built this project and the neighbors now decide that, hey, everything's going well here, maybe we should, get rid of these covenants and take advantage of this T3, they could do that. So right now, T3 doesn't look good to them, but I've gone through years of opportunities where a project is stopped and then the zoning stays there and the economics that you're putting upon us that someone could buy our lot, well, the same thing could happen to these lots. We've had people band together and sell whole neighborhoods as a group based on a zoning. That can happen here. So all the parameters of what could happen, it's an open book. Yes, I don't plan to live. Lived here 30 years. Well, nothing's guaranteed on either side by my property owner or these property owners on what they will do. When that T3 is there, that gives them some rights and some opportunities to take advantage of in the future. So is T3 appropriate? Because it's beyond us right now.
But let me recap, and we'll so we can move on. What's being asked of this council, based on what I've heard, is not to change from T3. All you're asking this council to do is change to an exception and allow shared parking. Do I have that understanding correct?
Yes, sir. There's a few minor things that would go along with that in the standards, so we make sure that that's taken care of and taking care of the neighborhood. But that's what we're looking at. Yeah, and that would have to go back to the planning commission and back to you for approval.
Right. So, but again, what this council, I just want, so we're clear, what, when we go to first reading, what we're being asked to do is not change from T3 to T5. We're being asked to put an exception on this property,
No.
the shared parking.
What they're asking you for, and it's written, it's a text amendment to the actual zoning code.
Text amendment,
Yeah.
okay.
It would
This
be a
would not-
text amendment to the zoning code to allow for that parking in the T3.
So
And the
we're-
associated changes needed to necessitate that
They
for the
would have to-
T3. And it's going to be a full, it'll go to your planning commission, they'll make a recommendation, and then that ordinance change would come to you for a vote.
So it would be all.
All T3.
all T3,
would-
yes.
This would allow anything in T3 to have shared parking.
Right, and what they're saying, this is what's consistent with your White Hardy Boulevard master plan and your comp plan to allow
But
that shared parking.
And T3 allows all the things in there, so this architectural thing, once we allow shared parking, would allow this to happen.
This could be one of the options. Nothing else is being changed in your T3 other than allowing for that shared parking.
Shared parking.
And what's needed to necessitate that shared.
So all the things of T3 still apply to this property.
Correct. What you have in T3, that will continue, the chart you had, all of that will continue to apply. It'll just change that one line. Where is it? The parking.
So
Right
it's
here.
a text amendment. And the other thing that we've learned here today is that there could be, regardless what we do, there could be a dispute from the residents and the owner of this property over the CC&Rs.
There could be.
But that wouldn't put us in the middle.
No, sir. And what the city does require is that when an application is made, the applicant has to certify that they're in compliance with any existing covenants, if they exist. They certify that to us. But that's on the applicant. So it's not on the city council to decide on that, to make a judgment on that, to review that. You don't have to do that. You're not required to do that. And you don't really have standing to do that either.
Okay, I think I understand what we have to do. Again, I'm not here to make any decisions on it. I'm here to understand what's being proposed, what our responsibility as a council are. And I think, so if what's the next step? We go to first reading on this, or does it have to go to planning commission first?
So if we pursued a text amendment, that would have to go through the planning commission. And the thought would be that if we're pursuing the text amendment, then the rezoning would be withdrawn by the applicant. So what had been on your agenda for first reading would be taken off, but staff would develop the language to formalize the text amendment in the code, and then would introduce that to the planning commission, and then it would come to council for 2 readings.
So this text amendment is the official staff recommendation?
At this point, yes, and the basis for that is this. One, we wanted to protect and preserve the T3 development standards, and essentially saying those would be there as a buffer to the more urban development that's in the T5. But in order to facilitate the broader concept of this downtown redevelopment, we're going to need to incorporate shared parking. And that's why I'm stressing that it's not just this application, it is the broader picture for the corridor, because this will be the first of several that would likely come forward under those standards. But that's only if the council supports going in that direction.
And so do you need a straw poll? There's no binding vote.
It is not binding, but it's just direction to staff of whether we should prepare something or whether that's not something that we should consider, go back to the drawing board, come up with something else.
May I ask a question? Somewhere I got a little bit confused with all of that. So when you said that the applicant, this must be, we can change our wording to allow the shared parking. That is completely above and beyond what is being requested. So then before Mr. Moyd would be able to come back to us, does this CCR have to be sorted out?
No.
So, as part of our development standards, we require certification that they do not apply. That was submitted and provided by Mr. Johnson. Now, that does not mean that they can't be challenged. It's just we're not the ones that are able to challenge it. The applicants have met their burden by submitting proof, in their opinion, that they do not apply.
Okay, that's the question that I asked. Okay, thank you.
All right, so following up on what Steve just asked, if we do a straw poll on this text amendment, what happens next? And I think Harry asked the same thing. What happens next? It goes back to the planning commission.
Yeah, staff would have to develop the language, and then that language would have to be introduced to the planning commission. And then the planning commission would make a recommendation, and then it would appear before you as an ordinance to amend your code to adopt that language. And then it would be up to you to decide whether or not you move forward with it.
Would we leave, would we leave that off of our agenda until it comes back from the planning?
Again, I can't speak for the applicant. If it were me, I would let that process play out, knowing that it would allow for what they're looking to do in terms of development. But in theory, they're entitled to apply, they're entitled to ask you to make a decision on that. But based upon the feedback that we heard when this first came before you, there appears to be concerns with their request to rezone it to T5. So again, I can't make that decision for them, but I would say yes, that they would like to see that play out, because that would be the likely way that they would be able to move forward with the development as contemplated.
They need to withdraw the T5 request and then request what?
So the staff is going to be the one that's going to be making the request for a text amendment. And again, it's not specifically for this development, it's because we think that the amendment supports the overall concept for redeveloping the downtown area.
Okay, so where does that leave this conflict over the CCRs? That we're completely out of this.
The public has a right, and I know what you're trying to do, Steve, because I'm thinking this, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. But the public has, this isn't the end for the public. I
No.
mean, they have a right to,
They would be able to come to the planning commission, and they would also be able to come to council for both readings.
okay, so it's not, they, like.
But what
that's
we
what
have
I'm
to
worried
do,
about.
what we have to do, what's before this council is, if we want to take the shared parking text amendment, we have to give that direction. If we don't want to do anything right now because we're confused or we want to think about it, then we do nothing, and it goes nowhere. If we say, let it proceed, then what was tabled was a change to T5. So we either go to the shared parking route or go to the next step and vote on the T5 route. And, or wait and have another, or, you know, you want to think about it. Those are our choices at this point.
Yes, sir.
Because I think at this point, you know, we've heard from everybody, and except this gentleman wants to say something else. But we have to decide at some point, okay, what do we tell staff is the next thing we want done? Or if we don't want anything done, then the ordinance changing to T5 comes forward. Is that right?
Yes, they would have the right to have you act upon their
Because it's
application.
already gone through the planning commission. It's they have a right to ask us to.
That's it.
pass
We
on that.
couldn't postpone it indefinitely.
Right. Sir?
Mr. Mayor, Shedrick Coleman again. I will tell you that from the standpoint of my client, it would be in our best interest to pursue the text amendment because we really don't want T5. That we only had the T5 because to cover the parking. So if that can be addressed by the text amendment, we would be happy to get away from the T5 because I don't think T5 is in the best interest of the neighborhood. So we definitely would rather see it remain T3. So we would prefer that.
I think that's why we tabled it in the first place.
We're in
So,
agreement.
Council, I'm of the opinion, and I'll take a straw poll, you know, if you don't want to, that because we don't have to make any decision, but if we give a straw poll to go forward with the text amendment, at least that puts T5 off the table for now, puts it back in the planning commission, gives it at least 3 public hearings. It gives us time to make a final decision. And I think, because to do nothing, then we have to vote on T5, and that becomes a mess. So that's my thought. Does anybody want to add to that before I take a straw poll?
And I think this text amendment will benefit us in the future, so this doesn't arise again with our White Hardy Boulevard planning. I think I don't want to say this slipped through the cracks, but it's something you don't deal with until it pops up. So I think it is the right thing to do to amend our zoning to make this happen.
I think also, I'm sorry, go ahead.
The only thing that worries me about all of this is if we are going to open it to one person, and we're going to introduce shared parking going forward, we don't know what size of the other developments that are going to come to request shared parking. And are we opening Pandora's box by going through this process?
Great question. If you could pull back up the map to show the existing zoning. It's not everywhere. It really is only where T3 meets up with T4 and T5. So you're not going to have shared parking back here. You're only going to have it along this corridor. And again, to go back to that bigger picture of what the vision is, that's, I really think, what you were anticipating, which is build your commercial up here, have some shared parking, and then have something less intense behind it as you transition to more of a residential neighborhood. But for our purposes, with the language that we've talked about, it would really only apply to this boundary right here.
So it's only going to be applicable to the portion that's marked T3.
So let me add to that. That would also allow it for this area right here. T4 and T5. Again, the shared parking concept within the transect zones, yes.
They're already, it's already in those.
Okay.
Oh, it's already in T4.
It's already in T4 and T5. Well, I think the choice to have staff pursue the text amendment gives everybody more time to think. I think at some point, we need an executive session to advise us on the legal parts that we discussed sometime prior to first reading, just to make sure we understand our legal responsibilities as well. So let me take a straw poll as to, whether or not we want to do shared parking, the text amendment, excuse me. And if you don't want to do that and you want to offer some other alternative, please do so at that time. So, Steve?
I think we should pursue the text amendment at this time.
Valerie?
Text amendment for me as
Bo?
well.
John?
Text amendment for protection, but also with the understanding, and we have had that understanding tonight, that the public will have some more input later on before anything is definitely decided.
They'll have input at the planning department. Also, if we feel that after the planning department, we need to have another workshop, we have that right to do so. So there's going to be at least 3 public hearings, and we can add a 4th if we feel it's necessary.
Can I make a suggestion? We have our planning meetings at 10 o'clock in the morning. Would it be possible for when this comes to planning to schedule it later so the residents who live there and actually work can attend? I know, can you make that happen?
Make that recommendation, absolutely.
Okay, please do, because I think they have a voice and they need to be heard. And, we can't expect them to leave their jobs for this. They'll have their time at council also, but I think at planning, they should be heard also.
Well, if they know it far enough in advance too, that you might make some plans.
Yeah, but, if.
They can make plans for 5. I think it's a good suggestion. I would support that. So I agree with the text amendment. It gives everybody time to sit back and think about the ramifications and the understanding, and hopefully in the end we'll make wise decision. So, Mr. Gruber, the straw poll, non-binding straw poll of the council is that we should pursue the route of text amendment on this
Yes, sir.
issue.
We'll likely need a couple of weeks to work on drafting the language, so I would anticipate that this is probably something that would come before the Planning Commission at their May meeting.
Okay, you just keep us advised.
Yes, sir.
And we'll go according to that. Is everybody understood on what the process? Please, miss.
I just wanted to ask a question. Maureen Gardner, 106 Sauce Court. So does that mean I think it's April 17th, that meeting is no longer, or that?
There's nothing, right now, there's
Wanted to
no
make sure.
planning commission meeting scheduled for April from what they were told, because there's no agenda, or there wasn't.
And what she's referring to is the motion that City Council made to table this matter to a date.
Oh, that one?
I just wanted to make sure so
Yep.
that.
What we're going to look to do is work with the applicant to have them send us something temporarily withdrawing their request in
Okay.
order to allow us to go through this effort, which means it'll come off that agenda.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it.
So if I understand what Mr. Gruber just said, is if the applicant insists, we would have to put it on the agenda and vote on the T5.
Okay.
Because they have that right, because it's already been through the plan. But if they do, as Mr. Gruber suggests, then yes, it would be taken
So
off the
will
agenda.
we be notified that it's been withdrawn so we don't have to attend the?
Could we
April 17th
make
meeting?
sure that on anything, any meeting, that Sauls Court get letters?
Because we got a letter for the first meeting, but then there was just a little stake in the ground, and the dates were so small
Let's
that half
get,
the neighbors
uh,
didn't see it.
I'm asking staff
Okay.
to make sure any meeting regarding this be sent to all the residents of Sauls Court. Can we do that?
Thank you guys so much.
You're welcome. Gentlemen?
We're in agreement.
Okay. So that's where we're heading. I want to thank everybody for their patience, for their input, and we'll get there.
Thank you.
I don't know where we'll get, but we'll get there.
We'll get somewhere. We'll get the right place. Thanks a
We will
lot.
get somewhere.
We're going in some direction.